was 28, and I started using cycles and then coming off cycles completely. And that was kind of the way it went. And it was up and down, like I would get some weight and some strength, and then it would kind of go away. Like I really didn't have much guidance other than a guy that was selling me stuff out of a duffel bag at Gold's Gym.
What's up, everybody? Dr. Alex Tatem here, men's health specialist and urologist. And today we've got something really special for you guys. We are interviewing my good friend and patient, Mr. Steve Gentili. Steve is a former elite powerlifter. He is the founder of Indy City Barbell, where we're coming to you from today. And he's someone whose journey from peak athleticism to overcoming some pretty serious health challenges has been really inspirational to me personally. And Steve, I'm happy to have you here, man. Thanks for being.
Yeah, thanks for coming in, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
Always a pleasure.
So the strength is in the struggle. What does that mean?
Oof. So that is something that came to me a long time ago. It was, it's not something that I made up. It's a saying that has been out there. I have it tattooed on my chest, but I actually started with this kind of life mantra. Going back, there's been a lot of moments in my life where I kind of felt like bad things kept happening to me. And it was my mentality that this is unfair. Life is so hard for me. These other people have it so easily. Why is that? Why is it always harder for me? Why do I get in trouble? Why do I get hurt? Why do these things keep happening to me? And then I started thinking more introspectively about how everything in life isn't positive or negative. It's how we interpret it. So I started to look at these things as challenges for me to personally overcome and grow from.
Yeah.
So not positive, not negative, but learning that overcoming these challenges allowed me to become a better version of myself.
So when did that realization or that understanding of strength coming from struggle, was that something that came during your high school years? You were a standout athlete in high school, you went on to play football at UCLA. Like, when did that really crystallize into this mantra that you live by?
Yeah, so it was after high school, before I started my powerlifting career, which actually served me very well, that I could get into in a little bit. But it was a point in my life where I had fought very hard to play college ball, lost college football, lost my sister in a car crash, and then found out my mom was stage 4 cancer, and really started going down this path that I've been down before, repeating these destructive lifestyles that always led me to somewhere that was worse than where I started. So I started to realize that I'm heading down the similar path, and that's when I started looking at alternatives to my perspective on these things.
Yeah. So, tell us a little bit more about, how your football career was taken from you and what that did to you mentally.
Yeah. So out of high school, I was recruited to play football. I didn't realize that when I was going to high school, they had put me into a LR program, learning resource. I had dyslexia and other educational hurdles that I had overcome. So it's a product of the Chicago public school system. They kind of put me on the short bus and said, you're going to be someone else's problems.
Yeah.
So when I graduated, I didn't even have my core 40. I didn't qualify for college. And nobody told me that was going to be a thing. And then I ended up getting hit in the face with a brick and tearing my retina, and I was not allowed to have any physical contact for 3 years.
Oh, man.
So it was like back-to-back bad news. And at that point, I became a personal trainer. I thought that was going to be my career. Then 2007 hit when the recession happened. And first thing to go, luxury items, personal training.
Yeah.
So I started scrambling, looking for a plan B, was cleared to play football, and decided to go back to school to further my education, and started with the JUCO route. No one's going to take a 20-year-old, been out of high school for 2 years, and no experience. So I played at Santa Monica College, didn't get a lot of help from the coaches recruitment wise, but I was an all academic on the honor roll, dean's list every semester. So I started doing my own recruitment, end up at reaching out to UCLA, which Santa Monica College is a feeder school to UCLA, but it's still a competitive program to get in, and especially the football.
Yeah.
So when I got in as a preferred walk-on, it was through hard work, showing up on time, saying the right things, doing the right things, that I was able to earn a place on the team. And then my second year at UCLA, so it would have been my junior year of college. I'd been in school for 4 years, but still only a junior.
Yeah.
And I ended up tearing my Liz Frank in my foot. I rehabbed that, came back, earned a starting spot. The first game of the season, I blew out my meniscus and my PCL. Rehabbed that, came back to play in the last game. We didn't make the playoffs, but I played against USC. And right after that last game, I started my off-season conditioning, and I blew my Achilles tendon. So it was 3 major leg injuries all on the same leg, 3 different surgeries, 3 different rehabs, and then that was it. Football was over. Ended up not going to school, depressed. Like I said, these life patterns like drugs and alcohol, staying out partying, ditching class, and then ended up losing my scholarship. Not to any fault of UCLA. They would have kept me on. They would have had me come back. But I knew my football career was over because I was getting recruited. NFL scouts are looking at you, and then all of a sudden your phone goes dead.
Sure. So college, junior year, but your 4th year of college,
right?
You have all these injuries, takes you out of the sport that you love.
Right.
And all of a sudden, what had kind of propelled you and kind of been your driving force was robbed from you.
Right.
Like, how do you recover from that? Like, how do you kind of center yourself? How do you find that new purpose?
Well, it took a long time. So my sister was actually at my last game. She died 3 months after that. And then 4 months after that, I'm partying, I'm doing drugs. And my mom is diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. She died 3 months after that. So it was all this back-to-back incidences, but it allowed me, I can remember the day I found out my mom died. And it was through an email that I woke up to. And just, not that I had a lot going on at that age where I was checking my emails all the time, but something told me to look into my email. And that morning she had passed away. And I remember feeling so alone. Here I am on the other, my family's all over the States. None of them live together. I'm living in Los Angeles. My closest relative is my sister who lives in Austin, Texas, thousands of miles away. And just feeling so alone and so isolated that it kind of felt like nothing positive was going to happen with my life, and that these things were signs that I needed to do something different. So I decided to go back to school and finish my degree because that's what my mother wanted. And I ended up going to a Christian university because that's what my mother wanted. She really hung on to faith as a life raft when she entered the last stages of her disease, and so I honored those wishes. But it was through that allowed me to take a larger look at what I think about as the bigger picture in life, and stop getting hung up on this ideology that these destructive forces are out to get you, and these are negative experiences, rather than just living in the moment and taking it day by day and evaluating where you're at and meeting yourself there.
Yeah. You can get hit by the hurricane, but you're still captain of your own ship.
And the hurricane doesn't have a feeling. Yeah. It's not out to get you.
Yeah.
These things happen. You have to accept those things and then focus on what you can control.
Yeah. Not to kind of skip topics, but obviously you've gone on to, achieve a lot of things, both athletically, professionally. But, you have this history of really hitting pretty much rock bottom. And we haven't even gotten to some of your biggest challenges yet. but yet some of if you look throughout history, if you look through who we know in our personal lives, some of the, highest achieving people that, we're blessed to meet have gone through like the lowest of lows. Like, why do you think that is?
I think that most people don't know who they are until they face adversity. And a lot of people aren't as strong as they think they are.
Yeah.
So the moment they hit adversity, they cower. They don't know how to react. They retreat.
Yeah.
But it's the people that have proven themselves over and over again that are able to overcome these things and go on to do great things.
Yeah.
So
it's interesting because I look back on my own life, and I am very fortunate in that I didn't have to go through the death of a parent at such a young age like you did. But my training to become a surgeon was pretty brutal. It was a very common, do 80 to 100 hour weeks. 80 was on the low end, and you're constantly on life or death situations, especially whenever you move up in the ranks and you're the one that's in the boat driving the surgery. And I remember having these moments of, especially after one or two like devastating complications where you just, you hit the floor, and, you really question, who you are. And it forces some really heavy introspection. And I think that, at least personally, that's when I really figured out who I was, what I'm capable of.
yeah, and I think that I've only ever had to be responsible for me. So having other people involved and being a father and being the person leading these surgeries, that's a totally different experience.
Yeah.
It's easy for me to accept responsibility for myself, but when you start adding in other pressures of now you're putting other people's lives in your hands, like that's not something I'm familiar with.
Yeah. It's just different. Yeah. So, at this point, you've gone back to school, you've gotten your degree, all right. You started personal training, and you thought that was something that you were going to do. Did you just continue on personal training after graduating college? What happened next?
Yeah, so I was personal training the whole time.
Okay, got it.
And I actually started my powerlifting career about the same time I started going back to school.
Yeah.
And that kind of took off.
Okay.
And I kind of thought about it as being a hobby, but it ended up turning more into like, hey, I'm good at this.
Yeah.
So I decided to devote a little bit more time towards that. And when I reached a point of success with my training, that I started coming up with the idea of opening up my own training studio.
Got it.
And at that point, I thought I was going to go to grad school or actually get into medical device sales.
Yeah.
So it was an opportunity that was presented to me through my brother-in-law who does this. It's a very lucrative job, and he's given me projections and very attractive offers. But ultimately, I had to sit down and say, what is it that I'm passionate about? Do I really just want the paycheck, or is this something that I'm going to look back at 10 years and really regret I didn't stick with the personal training? Because I do have a big passion for helping other people and for physical conditioning training.
Yeah. I mean, for listeners that may not be familiar with the fitness community, there is a light years worth of difference in between training for football, weight training for that type of athleticism, personal training, and then powerlifting.
Yeah.
Like, they are entirely different disciplines. And so what was that moment whenever, the light bulb, turned on for you and you're like, no, this is what I'm going to do. I am going to dedicate myself specifically to powerlifting.
Yeah, so that was, obviously there's a difference between having passion for training other people and then having passion for training myself.
Yeah.
My passion for training myself has always fueled my drive for knowledge, like learning why we do certain things and how we do certain things. But for me, I was doing some fitness modeling part-time, and I was at a point where I was getting too big. And they're like, you need to start slimming down for these roles. Because I wasn't big enough to be a bodybuilder at that point, and I wasn't small enough to kind of fit this athletic mold. And they're like, listen, dude, you got to pick a lane. And I wasn't really willing to give up any amount of strength. I was enjoying being strong and the still doing some of the athletic conditioning So I picked a lane. I chose strength training. I was like, you know what? I'm good at this, and I'm going to see how far I can take it.
Yeah. I think you're the only strength training coach, at least that I've met personally, that, still makes his clients do like box jumps. So
I don't think I'm the only one, but
Yeah.
you're seeing less and less of it for
yeah.
sure.
Yeah. So, before we get, too further along, tell me about Barbell Brigade, because that's a really cool moment in time that I think, deserves some discussion, because that was a cool group of guys.
Yeah, so the guys is a completely different story than how I found the gym. I found the gym.
Yeah.
I was at the LA Fit Expo, which I went every year.
So for those that don't know, Barbell Brigade is still a gym in LA,
Yeah,
right?
They're still open, but they
Yeah.
were, and they used to be a large clothing brand.
Yes.
And the clothing brand was arguably more successful than the gym.
Mm-hmm.
But they no longer do the clothes. Bart and Gio decided to close that down, but the gym is still open.
Yep.
And I was at LA Fit Expo, and this guy walked up to me and was like, "You look like you like to lift heavy," and handed me free day passes to this gym.
Yep.
So I went to the original location, and it was a storage unit. It had one rack, some barbells, dumbbells, but I love the community, and I love the guy working at the front desk was really helpful. Who ended up being Bart Kwan, who's the owner of the gym and owner of the clothing line. So they ended up having a bench seminar, and through that bench seminar, I met Mark Bell, who I had met before, but this was more of like I spent time with.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Dude, what are you doing? You got to train here." I think I benched 545 at that seminar.
Yep.
And that was one of those moments where he was just like, it was reinforcing.
And that was without a slingshot.
Yeah, no slingshot. No,
Okay.
I didn't even have wrist wraps. I have the video. It's just me in jeans. I'm pretty sure I already worked out that day. I was heading to a party with my girlfriend.
Yeah.
And I thought this was going to be like a sit down and take notes type of thing, not a workshop. So I ended up like taking the shirt off I had, and I had a tank top underneath. And he's just like, "How much can you bench?" And I'm like, "Well, I really don't work out with anybody else, so I don't know." And he's like, "Well, let's, we put on 5 plates. I do it for a triple."
Yeah.
And then he's like, "I think you're good for 545.
Yeah.
So we put it on. I miscued it and ended up missing it.
Yeah.
And then he's like, "Do this and this." And he got in my ear a little bit, got me excited, and I just smoked it on the second attempt.
That's awesome.
The crowd goes wild.
Yeah.
Instantly, I'll fall in love.
Yeah. And you're beyond hooked at that
I got
moment.
a membership that day.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got a membership that day.
That's awesome. So how long did you train there with the barbell guys?
Yeah, I was at Barbell Brigade from 2014 to 2018, so 4 years.
Got it. And what brought you to Indianapolis? Because you're cruising there in California, you're making progress in your strength career. What brought you here to the Midwest?
So how the crew came about was there was one guy, Adam Rodriguez, who I went and trained with him. And one of the things Mark had told me is find people stronger than you to work with. And my worst lift notoriously was squat. Adam was a great squatter. And then similarly, these other people started entering the group for various reasons. We got Mason Cervantes came on, and then T. Papula was next. And then Andy moved from Louisiana specifically to train with us. So then now we have 5 guys doing 2K totals. We all grew together. We became friends and competed in an environment which is very rare because we're all in the same weight class at one point.
Yeah.
And there was definitely competition, but none of us were really looking at each other as like, "Man, I hope he fails," or like there was none of that.
Yeah.
Which was unique to me because living in LA, everybody's fucking jealous.
Yeah.
So like, if anything that you have, and they're all snakes. So like, I find this group, but then I start thinking about my roots being in the Midwest, my mom dying, my father getting older. What did I really see in my life? And I had this gym hybrid, which was my personal training gym, kind of tapped out. We had the amount of trainers that you could have at that space. And, I was limited. So I wanted to come to Indy to build a gym in a community like I had built in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
So same deal.
So you came to Indianapolis with the specific mission of building what would become Indy City Barbell.
100%. I was looking at locations before I even moved here.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So we can't neglect this, but you got to tell me, when did you first hit 600 on bench?
That was a grind. So some of my guys that will be watching this, they'll appreciate it because they saw the journey.
Yeah.
I think my first benching competition was 524 because, as we know, pausing a bench press in a competition after you squat is a lot different than sitting in a seminar and doing a touch and go in front of a group of people when you're fresh. So it was a journey from that first 525. I think it took me 2 years. But you also got to understand at that point, anabolics were something new to me. So that was something that I started playing around with more.
Sure.
And through trial and error.
Yeah.
And sometimes more error than success, but I was able to find a groove that worked for me and allowed me to grow. And then the strength eventually came. I can remember my first 600-pound bench was in my studio. I had a group of guys come out, and I think it was 2017.
Got it. 2017. And, I think to give the audience an idea, like a 600-pound bench press, I looked this up on Google to confirm, that's approximately maybe the weight of 2.5 baby elephants. Like, it is an almost unbelievable amount of weight.
Yeah, at that point in it was a goal that not a lot of people had accomplished.
Yeah.
And to do it weighing under 300 pounds with a certain aesthetic, I think maybe a handful of guys have ever done in human history.
Yeah, that's wild. Now, you had mentioned this, and I want to get into this aspect of the conversation and of your journey. But when did performance enhancing drugs enter the scene? Like, when were you first exposed to them? When did you first start using? What did that look like?
Yeah, so I mean, I've been a personal trainer since 2004, and it was first exposed to me then.
Yeah.
I was working out at gyms with those guys, but I was always stronger than them, and like I looked better than most of them. So I was like, not something that I was really interested in using. It wasn't until later in life where I chose that lane of powerlifting and decided I'm going to take this as far as I can go, that I decided to kind of go full in. And that was like, I was 28.
Okay.
And I started using cycles and then coming off cycles completely.
Sure.
And that was kind of the way it went. And it was up and down, like I would get some weight and some strength and then it would kind of go away. Like I really didn't have much guidance other than a guy that was selling me stuff out of a duffel bag at Gold's Gym. But
yeah, because this was 2017. I mean, the internet was a thing, but there wasn't really any sort of education or resources to learn about.
Not at that time, no. And the only people that were talking about it were talking about massive usages and abuse, really, rather than how to do it safely.
Yeah. It's something that is probably like the worst kept secret in bodybuilding and powerlifting and maybe a handful of other sports.
Yeah.
Where really, I mean, to compete, you almost have to use because to be at that level.
I would say this, like the natural version of powerlifting wasn't exposed to me.
Yeah.
I didn't know about it.
Sure.
I might have chose that route had I known, but like the USAPL, all the guys that I looked up to and knew about were doing crazy numbers. And I didn't know there was weight classes.
Yeah.
I just was like, man, the biggest total wins. So I would just look at comparing myself to those guys, started a mission to see how much strength I was human possibly capable of.
Yeah. I mean, and it makes sense, right? You want to push to the absolute limits. And if, you think about it, even as someone who loves, is a fan of bodybuilding and is a fan of powerlifting, I couldn't name, the top competitors in natural powerlifting, but, I knew about Westside Barbell, back when I was a teenager, right? So
I would say it's more like there's been a shift. I think it's starting to shift back now that we have guys that are doing ridiculous numbers on gear. But for a while there, you had guys that were natural competing with the guys that were unnatural. They just didn't look the same.
Now, at any point during this time, whenever you first started using compounds and progressing your powerlifting career, did you ever seek medical care or talk to a doctor about this? Was lab work even a thing?
I trained with a general practitioner, and I would have open discussions with him, but not to be mean, but I don't know how much education he really had in those particular fields.
Sure.
And we would do blood work, but I'm not confident he knew exactly what he was looking for. It was just like certain things, and everything always came back okay. You're okay.
Okay. So that was the. So you're okay was kind of the limit of the discussions.
Yeah.
Got it. So as someone, and we'll getting into this. Well, I'm gonna save that for a little bit. But after you moved here to Indianapolis, you opened up Indy City at the old location. You just bootstrapped the whole thing yourself. You know, you didn't take out a single loan. I think you.
I didn't get approved for a loan. I tried.
Yeah.
They're like a gym? No.
Yeah, a gym downtown Indianapolis, strength gym? No.
Yeah.
No.
In the 48th most out of shape state.
Yeah.
In all of the United States? No, I don't think so.
Yeah. Fair enough. So you bootstrap Indy City, starts to get some momentum. And then all of a sudden, overnight, your life changes pretty radically in 2019.
Pretty soon, yeah. So I opened November 2018.
Okay.
I tore my pec right before I opened the gym in what was my last competition to date.
Yep.
At Record Breakers. May of 2019, while rehabbing the pec, I tear my quad tendon completely off the bone. And through that rehab, things were getting very difficult. I thought it was side effects from some of the medications, but I water retention and energy levels, and just wasn't recovering the same.
Sure.
And I was like, man, these back-to-back injuries are getting tough. And then end up in the ER with a blood pressure of 260 over 140, and through multiple testing over the course of a week of staying in the ICU, find out I'm in kidney failure. Yeah. So within the first 7 months of opening my gym, back-to-back things happening again. But at this point in my life, this is nothing new to me.
Yeah.
I was so numb to it, I can just remember feeling, here we go again.
Yeah.
So the first day I worked out at Barbell Brigade, I do the seminar. I bought my membership. That Monday, I work out with Adam Rodriguez, the first member of our original crew, and I tear my bicep.
Oh my God.
And that was my introduction to powerlifting.
See, I wouldn't have worked out with him again. Clearly, he jinxed you.
But it wasn't him. It wasn't him. And like I said, it's not positive or negative. These are just things that happen.
Yeah.
But now looking back at it, I can say, I have this genetic disorder. You have a predisposition for injuries. That's what took you out of powerlifting, or that's what took you out of powerlifting. That's what took you out of football. So it's this repetitive thing that now I have scientific data to support, but at those times, taking a more stoic approach to it. It's just nothing new. Let's get it going.
Okay.
And starting the rehab process. So sitting in that hospital bed, feeling so numb to it, it was just like, here's one more thing to overcome. Here's your chance to show people who you are.
Yeah. And just to give our listeners a little bit of context, not that dialysis is easy for anybody, but if you look what you had to go through just due to what you needed, your physical size, you were in that dialysis chair 5 times a week, right?
5 days a week, 4.5 hours a shot on the machine. It took about 7 hours a day driving, waiting in the waiting room, getting hooked up, getting taken off, driving home.
And this is while you're trying to run a business, okay?
Not running a business, but expand a business.
Yeah, grow a business. And, meanwhile, trying to be a decent boyfriend, right? Because you were with Lauren at this time.
Yeah.
And
support her. She wasn't working at that time.
That's right. Okay, because she was taking time off to help support you.
That, and she was going back to school to become a nurse.
That's right.
So the financial burdens of now I have employees, now I have to support Lauren, we're paying for school, and all these things that were choices, right? Like I could have very easily shut the gym down and lived on disability because I'm a qualified medically disabled.
Yeah.
So that was definitely a choice.
Well, you're well on your way. I've counted like 7 or 8 like career-ending injuries like during our conversation.
I have a hard time accepting I have a hard time accepting those facts, but
Stubbornness isn't a bad thing.
Not always.
Yeah. So, all right. So you're on dialysis, you're growing the business. All right. And, the gym at several points in time, like reached capacity as far as membership goes,
right.
if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where, you couldn't join if you tried because it was already just busting at the seams.
Yeah. We were running into parking issues, space issues.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, you and I happened to meet just by chance one day.
Yeah, randomly, but I had seeked you out and got denied at your clinic.
And God, this is embarrassing.
They said Alex isn't taking clients.
Yeah.
And then you, through conversation, asked me if I was taking clients, and I had told you no because I was dealing with dialysis and all these things.
Yeah.
But that was the initial. You walked up to me and asked me, hey, I'm interested in getting into programs. And I was like, hey, I'm not taking clients. And then through further conversation, I'm like, you're Alex Tatem. I'm like, you're the guy I've been trying to see for the last 3.5 years.
I'm glad that we both mutually shot each other down without knowing it, beforehand. But when I met you, you were still in the midst of dialysis.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, you saw a light at the end of the tunnel. You were working towards transplant.
But no timeline.
No timeline. No timeline. And, it was not the smooth sailing experience where you get a call in the middle of the night and all of a sudden you wake up with a new kidney. We had some real challenges, as we kind of work towards your transplant. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I had a sister that wanted to donate, but she was not able to donate she weighed too much, had to lose some weight, and took her 5 years to lose the weight. And it was never a conversation of like, hey, I'm gonna, she told me she was gonna lose the weight, and then she really didn't start for a long time. So I kind of gave up on that idea.
Yeah.
And just thought, like you said, I'd get a call at some point. But around year 2, I stopped urinating.
Yeah.
And that is when everything kind of took a dive.
Yeah.
And it was very hard for me.
Yeah.
And, I was still doing testosterone, but in spouts, I think I even told you this. I went and saw one of your coworkers or cohorts or however you explain it, but got some bad advice and didn't enjoy my experience with him. So I ended up letting my testosterone crash, which was the worst idea I could have done.
Yeah.
Ended up giving me way more negative side effects and trying to stay on the TRT or a low dose of tests, because I guess I can't call it TRT if I was doing it myself. But I was trying.
Yeah.
And then when I met you, there was definitely an uptick and even Lauren could see it. Like I physically was more present, and I still had nasty side effects, man. Like just being lethargic, the brain fog. It was hard for me to focus. I had limited energy day to day.
Dialysis is devastating. I don't care what other compounds you're on.
Yeah, no.
Yeah,
and at that point, it was more of like, I'm not looking for performance aspect. I'm trying to stay alive.
Yeah.
And I just need energy to get through the day, because it's a very catabolic process.
Yep.
And if you're not supplementing with testosterone, like I've seen guys
Waste away. Yeah.
In under a year.
I will tell you that as a medical provider, it is really devastating when you see not just the existential damage that cancer and chemotherapy does to like someone's mental state, but you see them start to slowly waste away, and you see them start to disappear in front of your eyes. And that was such a challenge for us as surgeons, for those patients that required chemotherapy before getting surgery for like their bladder cancer.
Yeah.
And basically they're walking into the biggest event of their life physically to have this radical surgery in the worst condition possible.
At their weakest, yeah.
Yeah, and especially a lot of the chemotherapy regimens included certain compounds that we know are gonatotoxic. And so I'm looking at these guys that I can just see from the doorway that they're hypogonadal. They've got low testosterone. And I remember, wondering that if we had maybe managed them a little bit better, would they be stronger? Would they recover from surgery? Would their, protein, be a little bit, their albumin, would it be a little bit higher? It's something that really sat with me, especially when you see the very challenging recovery process a lot of patients go through.
Yeah.
So, when I met you and we started working together to get you on a real TRT regimen, I think that was the first time you've actually worked with somebody and stuck with it long term. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Because you had met one other provider that one time, but that was a one-off thing.
Yeah, you were the first person. I have a tendency to trust doctors and do what they tell me, and I'll try things out, but when things don't make sense, they don't make sense.
Yeah.
But you explained things in a way, and it took some time, but it eventually got to the point where I trusted you with my life. And if you told me to do certain things, I would do those certain things.
Yeah.
So, but it did take some time, but you were the first person where I worked with you, and I started to feel better.
Yeah.
My whole dialysis experiences was not like that. I had a lot of doctors that just seemed, quite frankly, they didn't care, because most people, they don't make it to the surgery table, and they don't seem to care one way or another.
Yeah, I remember sitting down, talking to you, reviewing medical records, not from my office, but from your, from your
team, team, not one specific person, but a team of people responsible for these things.
And discussing some things that were pretty obvious in the notes and pretty obvious in your test results, but had never really been conveyed to you, at least.
All.
Yeah. We. I remember specifically looking at your cardiac function, which is, it can decline as dialysis progresses, but it did. I mean, you were right at the definition of congestive heart failure going into surgery. And I remember having to talk to your transplant surgeon, beforehand, to try and make the case that you were still healthy enough to get this. And again, ultimately that was their decision. I don't really know how much. I don't know if I made any difference there, but I was so happy whenever whenever you got that call.
No, yeah. It was so frustrating to me because you were the first person to mention it, and then I had never been talked about this the entire time I was on dialysis. And then the moment my sister gets approved to donate, they start telling me that, hey, you might not qualify because this is a problem. And I'm like, how is this a problem if I've never heard about it?
Yeah.
And it wasn't until you pointed it out, and I was so grateful. I remember screenshotting your message to me, screenshotting what the hospital said and the overlap. And then I eventually did get approved. And I do think that you played a role because Goggins, my surgeon.
Yeah.
And it was ultimately him that made that call, not just the board. So
yeah, I think that what helped is that the last text message on the thread that me and Goggins had before I texted him back was him thanking me for doing some favor when I was an intern, and he was paying me back with beer. So I'm pretty sure that was what made the difference.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so.
Yeah.
He's a great guy.
I love him.
They were trying to deny me because of my size too. They're like, he's 260 pounds. This isn't your average. And then they walked me up. I had to meet him in the outpatient unit.
Yeah.
And everybody else is like, oh, he's probably going to make you lose weight. He looks at me and he goes, this is Steve? And he's like, yep. He shakes my hand. He's like, lift up your shirt. I lift up my shirt. He's like, this guy's got abs. What are we talking about? So they're like going off a BMI scale, and he's talking about just muscle mass versus, and I'm kind of going down a rabbit hole, but real quickly, over that period of time, people were giving me all sorts of advice. You're not going to be able to eat this protein. You're not going to be able to take testosterone. You're not going to be all these things that were never mentioned once during my kidney transplant process.
Yeah.
Not once did someone say your testosterone is a problem. Not once did someone say eat less protein. And I've been doing these things, and through that, my kidney health has gotten better. Like my kidney health is at a point where it's the best it's ever been.
Yeah.
And I'm doing these things where everybody else told me I couldn't do it. So I'm like, I've never really listened to outside sources, but it just proves that all these other people have no clue what they're talking about.
Well, I mean, we've talked about this before, as somebody who has been through medical school residency and been in practice, our medical training is not really designed to make people healthy or the best versions of themselves. No. It's designed to manage disease.
Yeah, because these people that were talking to me were people that were coming from other programs. Mm-hmm. They didn't have Alex Tatem working with them. They didn't have Dr. Goggins doing their surgery. They had these other people giving them this bad information, and then I'd look at their pictures and be like, man, this guy's in bad shape.
Yeah. It's challenging, and that's something that I'm convicted about, right? As someone who, is a men's health specialist, this is, what I've dedicated my life to. Like, man, I got to take care of myself, right? Because if I walk in there into a room and, I've got, a gut going over my belt buckle, right? Like, what patient's going to want to listen to me?
Well, that was my first nephrologist.
Yeah. It's not a good look.
No.
Not a good look. So, you got your transplant, and, since that time, you had, a couple bumps in the road. You had a pretty significant CMV infection that took you out in October. Okay. But you've, crawled your way back from that. And I mean, right now, you're the strongest that you've been since you first got diagnosed with kidney disease, if I'm correct. Is that right?
Not correct.
Not correct?
I would say the strongest I've been since the later stages of dialysis.
Okay.
I kind of hung on to strength for a while.
Okay.
I benched 500 on dialysis, which is something I hang on to. But
you probably have the strongest bench on dialysis in human history.
I have to. I'm gonna take that title.
Yeah.
But no, it faded pretty quickly, and towards the end of it, I was lucky to get. But yes, I'm the strongest I've been in a long time.
Yeah. And so right now you have been on an upward trajectory as far as your fitness and your health. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Your numbers are looking great. You're planning on a major strength push here in the next 2 months. Can you share a little bit more about what your strength and fitness goals are, and maybe, give some context of your internal philosophy? Is it similar to what it was before? Has this changed going through dialysis, how you view strength?
The outlook on the strength aspect, no, because that was like going back to the original full circle conversation of strength is in the struggle.
Yeah.
This only really reinforces those things. So going through everything I've been through, I could walk away, right? Like I have a thriving business. I'm doing well. I don't need to come back and do another meet. And a lot of people are advising me against it. And it's not so much of, hey, I want to hit PRs and you got to do all these things to prove to people. But it is a can't think of the word. It is a bookmark to end my career and to walk away on my own terms. So I really want to just do these things that aren't PRs, but to come back just strong enough and kind of just walk away saying,
you ended on your own terms.
More than that you're capable of more than what people think that you are.
Yeah. And
be more of a pillar towards other people that are dealing with things. Because I know how many people have reached out to me and mutually to you as well, dealing with similar things, and just kind of show them, hey, there is a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not willing to sacrifice my health to that, and that's kind of what I'm proving here, is that you don't have to be unhealthy to do these things.
Yeah. And, you've managed to gather a pretty significant social media following from people who have followed your strength career, who have followed your health journey, and you've used that platform to encourage others, to share this message of the strength is in the struggle, and you are not defined, by your adversity. And so part of that is you've advocated for a health conscious way of approaching fitness, health, and anabolic use. Is there any advice that you would want to specifically share with young athletes who are up and coming and are considering maybe trying compounds or trying to jump into this industry?
Yeah, I think my advice to everybody is try to push off usage for as long as you can. If you're making progress, even if it's small amount of progress, then there's nothing to fix. Like if you have something that's working for you, don't change it. But you are dealing with an industry that rewards these freaks, so to speak, and guys are breaking records at younger ages. Guys are going pro at younger ages, and they want to be competitive faster. But yeah, the real thing that I push for is getting blood work and seeking out medical advice. I do think it's hard because not all doctors are as open-minded as you, and that when people do come out and say that they want to use anabolics or something like that, then their doctors kind of either won't treat them or just tell them to stop, not do it. So they're not getting the advice they need, and then they start leaning more into these online outlets and not really getting the specific advice tailored for them.
Yeah.
They're getting generalized blood work, but nobody to really overlook it and to see those red flags that you caught that my other doctors weren't.
Yeah. It's, we've talked about this, metaphor, beating it into the ground. It's like I tell my patients, taking anabolics is like driving a car 200 miles per hour. Driving to and from work like every single day, like why would you ever want to drive 200 miles per hour? Like I wouldn't, but there are some people that do want to.
Right.
And, there is never a way to drive 200 miles per hour risk-free. And there's no way to do that, quote unquote, safely. But there are a lot of ways that you can help mitigate that risk and be well informed. If you look at our IndyCar drivers here in Indianapolis, they have so many gauge clusters. They have so much information at their fingertips. They have an entire team supporting them. They are not going it alone, right? If someone goes out in the middle of a highway, and tries to drive their Honda Civic at 200 miles per hour, they end up as a red streak on the highway. That's just what's going to happen, right? And unfortunately, I think that we're seeing the equivalent of that happen in the fitness industry.
Yeah.
Because even very intelligent, arguably, people who are, performing at very high levels, they have huge followings, they're, stacking PRs and setting records, they aren't really getting solid medical advice, and they're burning the candle at both ends. And if you look at the data, some of the only sports where the athletes die early as opposed to living longer than the general population is in strength and physique.
Yep.
And I want to change that.
I think it's necessary.
Yeah. So just to celebrate some personal milestones. I mean, so you're finally getting hitched August.
I am August 8th.
Yeah.
It's been a 4-year engagement. We thought I was going to get a kidney.
Yeah.
Turned out my doctor just flat out lied to me.
Yeah.
And then prepping for the kidney.
Yep.
We pushed it off again.
Sure.
Because I was for real getting a kidney.
Yes.
And then through rehab, we pushed it off one more time.
Yeah.
So it's been a lot longer. It's been overdue.
That's awesome. So I tell you, if anyone has earned the best honeymoon ever, it's Lauren. She's fantastic.
Yeah, she's the best.
Yeah. And for our listeners, I'll just say my family particularly loves Lauren because she's actually been training my dad now for a year, maybe year and a half at this point.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
year and a half, 2 years.
And he's doing the best he's ever had. My dad's Afghan war veteran, been rocked by a couple of IEDs. He's a cancer survivor, had major cardiac surgery. He you wouldn't know it by looking at him, but this what you have built here and the community you've provided is one of the things that has helped him keep going.
Yeah, well, Tim fits right in, man. We love him.
Yeah,
everybody loves him. He's a pillar. He's a real pillar here.
Yeah.
And knowing all those things about him, you wouldn't know that with a daily conversation. One of the nicest, kindest people I've ever met in my life.
Yeah. I'm very blessed, and Steve, your story just really embodies resilience, transformation. And, we talked a little bit earlier about philosophy and that sort of thing. I will tell you, the universe, or at least as I believe it, and I think God still has a plan for you.
Yeah.
He ain't done with you yet.
No.
And I appreciate you sitting down and sharing your story with us today.
Yeah, man. I appreciate the opportunity to have that chance.
Absolutely. Thanks again.
Yep.
All right, guys, for everybody out there watching, I want to remind you that your health is your greatest asset. So if you are thinking about using compounds at any point in time, I encourage you to please think about what you're doing, why you're doing it, and seek out advice of a trained medical professional. Stay safe out there. Love you all. Until next time, this is Dr. Alex Tatem.